Eyewitness News is your local election headquarters from our studios in East Providence. A debate between the two candidates for state representative in Cranston's District 15. Hello, everybody. I'm Tim White. Thank you for joining us. Both candidates will have an opportunity to give a 1-minute closing statement at the end of this debate, and the candidates are, from left to right on your screen, the incumbent Democrat Nicholas Mattiello, who is an attorney and Speaker of the House, and his Republican challenger Stephen Frias, who is also a practicing attorney. Now, I will be moderating this debate along with my colleague Ted Nesi. Thank you again to Mr. Mattiello and Mr. Frias for agreeing to join us in this debate once again, as you were here 2 years ago. Fortunately, you know our rules since you've been here before. We have no strict format. We're looking for an open and honest discussion of the issues, but if you're not answering the question or you're taking too long, Ted or I will jump in. So let's begin, and Mr. Frias, I'm going to start with you. You've made one of our reports a big issue on the campaign trail, the scandal where former Representative Frank Montanaro Jr. received free tuition while working as one of Speaker Mattiello's top staffers. You've sent out thousands of negative mailers about the controversy and have harped on it in the media. But you aren't running against Frank Montanaro, you're running against Nick Mattiello. Is it fair for you to blame Mr. Mattiello for the scandal when there's no evidence he knew about the free tuition until we exposed it?
I think it's fair to talk about it, Tim, and I'll explain why. Basically, with Speaker Mattiello, when he found out about it, he could have done something about it. Basically, he could have terminated Frank Montanaro immediately. He didn't do so. For 2 weeks, he basically defended Mr. Montanaro, said it was a problem that the governor should look at, and then after 2 weeks of public pressure, finally Frank Montanaro agrees to give some of it back, 10 years interest-free. Now, when something is wrong, I see an abuse. We have a lot of abuses. And when you see an abuse, you stop it. If you don't, it goes on. And Frank Montanaro has teamed up with the Speaker. They've been representatives of our community for 30 of the last 32 years. They've been running our show in our community. And my feeling is we need a change. We cannot have self-dealing and insider dealing. And what's what Frank Montanaro represents? And the Speaker in 2006 ran against that, ran against the Montanaro machine. But then he joined forces with him, and that's why we need change.
Well, what about, you're asking for Mr. Mattiello to make a rush to judgment here. We file our story, and you immediately want him to terminate Mr. Montanaro. You immediately want him to repay all that money. Shouldn't Mr. Mattiello be thoughtful? Does he get any credit for being thoughtful about, let's take a step back, take a look at what happened, and then assess?
I would always, when something comes up, I will bring the person in and ask what occurred here. What happened? And he had 2 weeks to do this. He went on radio and talked about it. He defended it. Obviously, he could have brought Frank Montanaro in and said this, Frank, what's going on? You need to pay this whole thing back or you need to go. He didn't do that. He defended it, and on top of it, I can see when it comes to this issue is that Frank Montanaro was sort of the 1980s, there was a U2 song called With or Without You. He can't be with or without Frank Montanaro. That's why he can't let him go, because he needs him for his campaign, but he also drags him down his campaign.
Mr. Mattiello, you said in a letter to your constituents that, quote, as soon as you learned, you ordered Montanaro to repay the tuition. But that's simply not true. More than a week after our report, you told WPRO Radio, as Mr. Frias referenced, and I will quote what you said directly. I would be the first to say the benefit should not have been offered, but once you offer it, I expect an employee to take it. The mistake is on the college. It is not on the individual who took the benefit.
Yes, and I still believe that. I don't think that was an appropriate benefit, but that doesn't mean that I didn't speak to Frank Montanaro about it. That's between the union and Rhode Island College. It has nothing to do with me or the State House. Let's talk about what I've done.
But before Ethics you get there, reform, and we'll get into your policies, right. My question to you is, your letter to constituents, do you concede right now that that wasn't accurate?
Oh, no, it's absolutely accurate. Because I had my private conversations with Frank Montanaro, and I told him what I would suggest that he do, and he did follow through with that, but he had to have conversations with his wife and so forth. He's an employee. I'm not going to publicly state when and where I have private conversations with employees. That was between the union and Rhode Island College. My statements are accurate. Nobody knows when I talked to Frank Montanaro.
As soon as you learned about it,
Well, not the second. I had to learn facts and assess.
That is what you wrote to your constituents, is it not?
No, you're looking at it very nuanced.
I think he's looking at it exactly what was written. He said immediately.
So when you heard all the calls.
All right, let's take a reasonable read. Once I learned about it, I had a conversation with Frank, and then he talked to his family about it. But we're talking about something that happened at Rhode Island College. I've been the leader on ethics reform, made the jurisdiction of the General Assembly subject to the Ethics Commission, put our financial disclosures online, lobbying reform, campaign finance reform. I've been called the most active, most reform-oriented speaker in recent history by Go Local Prov, by the Providence Journal. That's what my administration's about. Rhode Island College has to answer for their own policies.
Why doesn't he get credit for all that reform he just rattled off?
Well, basically, first of all, in regards to the Ethics Commission reform, he was dead set against giving General Assembly oversight, Ethics Commission oversight over the General Assembly. He said it was dead on arrival. And then what occurred is that there was a possibility I could run against him, so then he started thinking maybe we should do something here. And then Ray Gallison, his appointee as finance chairman, got busted. He got raided, and he had to resign. So now the General Assembly's in panic mode. We got to do something look like we're ethical. So now we passed this, the legislation. And Phil West has said that my candidacy itself was a catalyst. We all know for that Ethics Commission movement. And secondly, we all know Ray Gallison came first, then the legislation was introduced. On the other aspects, look, he can cite this and he can cite that and he can quote people. I'll quote the professor at Providence College who was talking about his low approval numbers in this state. And he said that Speaker Mattiello represents the old Rhode Island of corruption and insider dealing. He can talk reform, but where's the line item veto? Where's the inspector general who may have caught Frank Montanaro's abuses? Where's term limits? We don't see any of that. Where's the legislative grant changes?
Well, Mr. Mattiello, we'll give you a final word in this topic.
Well, I can address that. You know, the Inspector General, that's a political tool. We have the Auditor General. We have the Office of Management and Budget. We have departments that do exactly that. So I just look at it from a cost perspective. But I would say that anyone that takes a reasonable look at our operation, the Speaker's office today, it's been reform-oriented. Any third-party validator will tell you that. They have said it. They have said it very publicly. So we've been reform-oriented, and we've been working on moving our economy forward, and we've got tremendous results to show.
All right, let's move on to an issue that dominated this year's Assembly session. That was the Paw Sox. Mr. Frias, I'll start with you on this. You were a vocal opponent of taxpayer support for a new Paw Sox stadium, and you hammered Mr. Mattiello on that issue. In the end, though, Mr. Mattiello backed a bill that was so stingy, in effect, that the team's now leaving for Worcester. His decisions mean Rhode Island taxpayers won't be on the hook for a new ballpark now, so doesn't he deserve credit from you on that end?
That's like somebody who tripped over themselves and fell on a bed of roses and it was by intent. Okay? I mean, what happened here was he was zigzagging around politically. So let's start out with this quickly. In 2015, he supported a new Paw Sox stadium in Providence that would have cost taxpayers $120 million. He used to attack people who opposed it. Then he almost got defeated in 2016. I started talking about the Paw Sox issue, and so then he started saying, I'm going to listen to the people. But then his caucus starts giving him problems in 2018 about it, and the Senate's giving him grief. So he starts trying to figure out some plan to come out of here so that he can figure out a way to satisfy the public and satisfy the political people. So he comes up with this junk bond plant. And I don't know what his zigzagging around was intended, but what I know is that the reason we don't have a taxpayer-funded stadium is not because he was standing up for the taxpayers. He was zigzagging around, and we lucked out.
All right, Mr. Mattiello, your response to that version of events?
Well, it's an interesting self-serving characterization. I did like the Providence Stadium, but I always said way back then that it was subject to voter approval and subject to seeing what the voters said about it. And what I've said very early on the Pawtucket proposal was that we would see what the will of the people was. We worked real hard at figuring out where that was. I came to the conclusion they did not want a state backing of the stadium. So we came to the conclusion, and I listened to a lot of my colleagues also, and they were all learning the same thing. So we responded to that, and we came to the conclusion that proposal would not move forward. Late in the process, someone brought to me the proposal of a special revenue bond, and in that case, you simply commit a revenue stream. It's not a junk bond. It's the commitment of the revenue stream, and what we committed was exactly the amount of money we would lose if the Paw Sox left, their sales tax revenue and their income tax revenue. no backing. The investor would take all the risk. It would not cost the taxpayers $1 more than that. No taxpayer backing and no Pawtucket backing, as Mr. Frias said. He clearly just doesn't understand the plan. Special revenue bond, the revenues would be the only thing backing it. You know, unfortunately, Worcester came up with a $100 million plus deal. It was too rich. Rhode Island would never do that and should not do that. And I think the taxpayers were wise. And at the end of the day, we responded to the will of the taxpayers. I'm not sure how anybody could object to that, but Mr. Frias seems to find a way.
Some people at the State House were less frustrated by your opposition to the bill than the way the process unfolded, that you killed the Senate bill on arrival, waited months to release your own bill, and then there wasn't a vote till the night before adjournment. Why didn't you allow a vote on the original PAWSOX bill, even if you were going to vote against it as a representative of District 15?
Because my colleagues were hearing the same thing I did. My colleagues didn't want it. We don't put bills on the floor just to vote them down. I would not think that was good for the PAWSOX or for the process. So we kept collaborating, and I thought that it probably was not going to go anywhere. The reason the process occurred at the end is I thought we weren't going to do anything, and then I learned of the special revenue bond option, and I started looking into that and pursuing that at the end. Now, at that point, you have to talk to Pawtucket, you have to talk to the PAWSOX, and those conversations were going on at a staff level. So it took us to the end of the process, but it was at the end per chance only because we learned of that option within the last month of session.
Mr. Frias, final thought before we move on.
Very quickly. He's talked about he supported the Providence Stadium plan, but he wanted voter approval. That's false. In January of 2018, there was an article in the Providence Journal which indicated we can't have voter approval for this. Also, in regards to Pawtucket, Pawtucket's redevelopment agency would have been on the hook for this thing, and if Pawtucket's redevelopment agency went down, you know the city of Pawtucket would have been affected, and then the state would have to come bail in. So in the end, the taxpayers were paying money, and if things went wrong, we were going to have to pay for it, and it was junk bond because it's high interest rate, and that's why this deal fell apart, is that the owners and the taxpayers were going to have to pay more money under his deal than under the original Senate plan.
10 seconds, Mr. Mattiello.
I have to say, that's just not true. There was never any backing or guarantee. You have to be confined with the truth and the facts. No guarantee, and I never said, I did say voter approval today, but I said we'd assess the will of the people.
All right. We're gonna move on to our rapid fire section right now. You are both familiar with this since you've been here before. We don't want to belabor these issues. We're looking for a 1 or 2 word answer on these so we can move through them quickly. Mr. Mattiello, do you support or oppose a bill that would keep expired public sector contracts in place until a new one is approved, also known as the continuing contract bill?
Approve.
Okay. And Mr. Frias?
Oppose.
Yes or no, Mr. Frias, should there be term limits for state lawmakers?
Absolutely.
And how long?
No more than 8 years.
And Mr. Mattiello?
No, absolutely not. They do not work in any state that has them, and that's what the legislators and the people from those states
Stick with
tell
you,
us.
Mr. Mattiello. If the Legislative Commission that's currently meeting recommends legalizing marijuana in Rhode Island, would you consider it?
We consider all options.
Mr. Frias?
Everybody talks about considering. I'm not in favor of legal pot.
Okay.
I'm not in favor either, but we would do the analysis.
Okay. Thank you. Letter grade, Mr. Frias, for the job performance of Governor Gina Raimondo, A through F.
D.
Mr. Mattiello?
I don't grade colleagues. I never have, but I do support her, and she's doing a good job moving our economy forward.
If Channel 12 called your house with our poll and we ask for job performance, excellent, good, fair, poor, what would you say?
I just don't answer that, but she's doing a great job moving the economy forward, and I support her.
Why don't we try one on your mayor, letter grade for Mayor Alan Fung?
I just don't grade colleagues, but he's done a good job as mayor of Cranston for the most part.
Mr. Frias?
There's been hiccups.
A through F on Mayor Alan Fung.
A minus, and I think you should let your tag team partner know that Governor Fung,
All
Mayor
right,
Fung has done a good job.
Mr. Frias, Rhode Island lawmakers are considering a bill called the Reproductive Health Care Act, which would codify abortion rights in state law. Do you support or oppose that bill?
It does more than that, and I oppose it.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The Reproductive Health Care Act. Do you support or oppose that?
I'm pro-life, but I understand there's a big concern. So we'll certainly have our discussions, and you have to respect large segments of the population.
Let me just ask you, specific to you, Mr. Mattiello. You're under a lot of pressure to bring that bill up for a vote from women in your caucus. Will you let that happen next year?
Well, we're going to have a discussion about it. I've got a lot of colleagues and chair folks, and we'll talk with them, but I do recognize that there's a big segment of the population that has interest in that. And and you certainly try to respect the people that you represent.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Frias, Mr. Mattiello is running heavily on his record on the economy and the policies he's put forward or had approved while he's been Speaker. And it's true that quite a number of tax cuts have been passed since he became Speaker in 2014. Some conservatives argue that if you defeat Mr. Mattiello, it'll actually move state policy to the left because a more progressive lawmaker could very well replace him as Speaker, voted by the Democrats. Are you willing to give up the potential for more conservative policies if you defeat Speaker Mattiello and become a rank-and-file Republican?
Very simple. Start out with this answer. Taxes have been cut and other taxes have been expanded or gone up under Speaker Mattiello as Majority Leader and as Speaker, number one. Number two, if we defeat the Speaker, we will not get a progressive Speaker. What we would get is a more ethical Speaker, a Speaker who doesn't run campaigns that engage in illegal activities, a Speaker who may support government reforms like a line item veto. I think we can have in this state lower taxes and government reforms, and we don't have to be dependent on a Speaker who, like Mr. Mattiello. And, you know, I don't understand this argument we're going to get a progressive Speaker. If the progressives had enough power to take over the House, they would do it right now. They don't. So let's get somebody in there new. Let's end the culture of corruption, and let's bring change to Rhode Island.
Mr. Mattiello, I asked the same question to Governor Raimondo, and you've worked closely together. The most recent official forecast is over the next 5 years, Rhode Island will rank 42nd out of 50 for income growth, 44th out of 50 for economic growth, and 45th out of 50 for job growth. How can you be satisfied with still being in the bottom 10 on those crucial measures?
Because we're moving up, and we're getting better. The Tax Foundation in Washington, D.C. just gave myself and the governor an award. It's a conservative, preeminent organization, and our tax burden on our citizens has gone from being the 47th most oppressive to the 37th. We've passed ahead of 10 states in just 4.5 years of my leadership. So while Mr. Frias mischaracterizes my record, third-party validation says we're doing better than 10 other states under my leadership, cutting the corporate tax, the minimum corporate tax, sales tax on energy costs for business, Rhode Island income tax on Social Security income for people that can't afford to pay more. That's my actual record, and it's validated. Cap Willie had a letter to the editor yesterday. He said, and he's an accountant that works with these numbers, no broad-based tax increases under my leadership. We've been cutting. It's recognized by everybody in the business community that works with numbers, but Mr. Frias mischaracterizes my record.
Your response?
We have a very solid record for the economy, and we're doing a lot better than we were.
All right.
Okay, so let's go through this quick. 47 to 37. Okay, so that's basically we've gone from an F minus to a D minus. In my household, that's not satisfactory. We got to be beating Massachusetts. We can't be saying, hey, we're just this far behind from Massachusetts and our neighboring states. Second, in regards to these taxes, we've expanded the sales tax on the internet.
We have not.
Yes, we have.
We have not.
I'm paying a tax on the internet. I don't know if you are.
You always had a tax on the internet,
well,
sir.
I'm paying it now. Over-counter drugs, expanded. Pet services, sales tax.
Do you want
Taxi
a dog?
services, no. No, I had a cat, died. Okay, now you got me off message. Now, when it comes to this, and also other things such as DMV fees, gas tax. So we are paying more in taxes under you. You can talk, even the car tax. Why do we pay the car tax as high as you did? Because you ended up, you rolled back the phase out in 2010. Now you're trying to make up for it. Okay. So everything is, you've raised taxes. So all I can tell you is CNBC rates us as the 5th worst in the country. All these other people rate us as really bad. So you're basically saying we've made progress. Yeah, we've gone from the bottom of the barrel to the top of the bottom of the barrel, and you're proud of that, and that's not satisfactory.
Well,
Very briefly, Mr. Mattiello.
We were low when I took over, and we're moving in the right direction, and we're doing much, much better than we are. And third-party validators will tell you. Mr. Frias looks at the internet tax. That was always a tax, and you have to be fair to your brick-and-mortar stores. I got a call one time from a dress company.
Quickly, please.
People go into brick and mortar stores, get a number, and then buy it on the internet, and we're hurting the brick and mortar stores. That tax was always due. Mr. Frias is doing what he always does. He mischaracterizes. We're just treating everybody fairly right now.
The way to do it is to lower the sales tax for everybody. If you're going to expand it, lower the rate, make us more competitive.
All right, Mr. Frias, let's stick with you. The state Republicans have been very critical of Mr. Mattiello for tapping heavily into the legislative grant program. If you win, will Cranston residents just have to accept that those grants, which fund such things as you know as Little Leagues and youth hockey programs, that those are just going to disappear if you win?
Well, basically, I won't be promoting legislative grants. I won't be asking for them. I won't be giving them out. And so I think what's going to happen is that if there's less money coming in from the government and people see that, they'll put more money of themselves. That's what charity was. These legislative grants are a new invention. They've only existed.
So you're predicting that if you put more money into government, people will be more philanthropic, and that's going to offset?
If the government's doing something, people don't give. They say the government's doing that for you. That's why we're one of the worst places in the country for philanthropy. If they see that the government's not doing it, then they'll step up. I'd contribute to local organizations, and I think other people will contribute. And I think that's what's going to occur. If the legislative grant program were to end in this state, I think more charitable work would happen.
And that would happen over the long term. Should these programs expect that they're going to see less money if it is State Representative Steve Frias?
If you are dependent on legislative grants, you will not be getting a legislative grant from me.
Mr. Mattiello, let's touch on this real briefly. As I reported, you lead the pack in dishing out individual legislative grants in the House. You're one of 75 House lawmakers, but make up 10% of the legislative grant spending. You always claim you're budget conscious. Why is this program off the table for cutting?
Well, first of all, I would consider cutting it. We actually had that conversation with my colleagues and with the Senate, and nobody wants to cut it, and I'm not the only one in the General Assembly. So if everybody wants to cut it, I'd be open to it. But as long as it's
there. You could cut it on your own by handing out less legislative grants, couldn't you?
As long as the program's there and there are needs in my community, we'll meet the needs in my community.
But there are needs of the community in Pawtucket, there are needs of the community in Woonsocket and Central Falls. Your community gets the most because you're in leadership.
My community does well because I have the tools at my disposal to take care of needs with our senior centers, with our little leagues. We have beautiful fields that our kids play on and have the benefit of because I look at needs, I assess them, and I take care of them. As long as the program is there and I'm able to help folks, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to take care of our seniors, our kids, and everybody who has a need in our society.
Okay. I want to ask you both about your leadership positions and your political parties and some of the issues that have roiled politics recently. Mr. Mattiello, the debate over Brett Kavanaugh and Christine Blasey Ford has focused new attention on the Me Too movement. Here in Rhode Island, you put Representative Tanzi in charge of a commission on sexual harassment after she alleged it was a problem in the House of Representatives. They came up with a group of bills, none of them passed. Do you think sexual harassment is a problem in the House? And if so, how have you addressed it?
Well, sexual harassment is a problem throughout society, and the House is one segment of society. We've addressed it by requiring training for all of our employees, and we made the recommendation for our representatives. And that's the first way we did it. We created the commission. The bills all came in at the end. Now, as you know, I'm a pro-business speaker. That's how we've lowered our unemployment rate from 11 to 4. We have more jobs than ever before. So you have to take a look at the impact of some of these bills, and that's what I told Representative Tanzi and everybody at the time. We will assess that, but we need a longer period of time to have conversations with folks and to see what the impact is going to be on businesses. So that process will start up again in January, and we'll have conversations and we'll move the bills along as is appropriate at that time.
As Speaker, have you ever taken any action to deal with specific sexual harassment allegations?
Issues come up here and there, yes, and we've addressed them.
Are you satisfied with how they've been addressed?
I am.
All right, Mr. Frias, you serve on the Republican National Committee, which is working hard to support President Trump. In recent weeks, the president publicly mocked Christine Blasey Ford. He called a woman horseface on Twitter, and he praised a congressman just last night for physically assaulting a reporter. As one of Rhode Island's top Republicans, do you think that sort of rhetoric from the president is appropriate?
No. I don't talk the same way the president does. I've never called anyone a horseface. I don't mock people who felt they've been through a tough time. And I believe in the First Amendment. Even when you guys don't agree with me and say things I don't like, I respect your right to do so, and I don't encourage people to physically assault you.
Thank you for that.
Okay. I mean, that's what I can tell you.
All right, so we have a little under a minute before we have to get to our closing statement. So I'm going to ask each of you two very brief questions. So let's keep it brief. Mr. Frias, do you support or oppose in-person early voting?
In-person early voting.
Right.
If I could get away with get rid of the mail ballot system that's been going on.
But do you support in-person early voting?
I would consider it.
Okay, Mr. Mattiello?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, and with 30 seconds left before closing, it's been sort of a tense time the last 30 minutes. So to cut the tension, what is the best restaurant in Cranston?
Tommy's Pizza.
I had a feeling you'd say that.
And Wienerima. Those are my
You can
two
only pick
favorites.
one.
Yeah, don't try to get away with that, Mr.
Sorry,
Speaker.
John.
Mr. Frias, what is your favorite
The
restaurant?
Chapel View one.
Chapel View. All right, as I said, each candidate will have a 1-minute closing statement, the order of which was drawn randomly prior to this debate. First up is Mr. Mattiello. Mr. Mattiello, your 1-minute closing statement.
Well, thank you both. It's been a pleasure and honor for me to be here, and a pleasure and an honor to represent the citizens of District 15. In my time as representative and as speaker, my goal has been jobs in the economy. That's why our unemployment rate is down from 11 to 4%, or 3.9, I think. It ticked down just in the last few days. That's why we have more jobs than ever before. But we have to continue this focus, and we have to continue moving in the right direction. The car tax phase out is something that I recognize the will and the needs of our citizens, and we're going to work on phasing that out. So thank you for the honor of serving you, and my focus will be on jobs in the economy and keeping us moving in the same positive direction that we've been moving in.
All right, Mr. Mattiello, thank you very much. Now, Mr. Frias, your 1-minute closing statement.
Hi, my name's Steve, and people ask me, why am I running against Speaker Mattiello? I have 3 good reasons. My 3 children. My oldest is 12 years old. He's been alive almost as long as the Speaker's been in office. Someday soon, he's going to be going away to college, and maybe not coming back, because this state doesn't produce the kind of good jobs that our youth deserve. We're losing our future, and it's been happening like that for a long time. Some people up at the State House, well, they think that we can get by being a high-tax state with a reputation for corruption. Maybe they're satisfied with the status quo. Maybe they know a guy. I know this. We should aspire for more. We should aspire for excellence. If you share my aspirations, vote for me. Give me a chance. We can change the State House, but we got to change who will run it. That's why we need the clean house.
Mr. Frias, thank you very much, and I do want to thank both of you for joining us. These things are never easy, so we appreciate you accepting our invitation to take part in this debate. And for our viewers, remember, Eyewitness News is your local election headquarters with complete campaign coverage on WPRI 12 and WPRI.com. That is always where you can see all of our debates so far this season, including in the race for governor and U.S. Senate. And we will have a Providence mayoral debate 2 weeks from today here in the WPRI 12 studios, so make sure you tune in for that one. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. I want to thank you for watching this debate. Again, if you missed any of it, it's on WPRI.com. Take care.